Today on the Chad Slagle Show, coaching you to and through retirement, we are going to discuss why having an open mind for your retirement is so important in today's economic environment. And on our Coach's Corner today, we're going to discuss the old way of financial planning and why it may no longer be right for you. And on our Chalk Talk segment today, we're going to discuss some important components to the new way of financial planning and how it can benefit you and your family in retirement. So sit back, relax, and learn. The Chad Slagle Show starts now. I'm Chad Slagle. I believe financial planning is about educating people and empowering them to make better decisions with their hard-earned dollars. Coaching gives me satisfaction from watching a player succeed and get better. You need an experienced team around you. The best coaches have great assistant coaches. I have brought a lot of the techniques and structure I learned from playing and coaching football and apply them to the world of investing. My goal now is to coach as many individuals and families as I can on how to get successfully to and through retirement. Welcome into the Chad Slagle Show, coaching you to and through retirement. I'm the coach, Chad Slagle, along with my colleague, Chad Tobin. And today on the Clipboard segment, we're going to discuss why having an open mind for your retirement is so important in today's economic environment. You know, and this pandemic has taught us anything, Chad. I would say that we have to be resilient and open-minded to change and be open to finding new ways to do things. You know, one thing that we talk a lot about with our clients is you always have to be forward-thinking, especially now, and to be looking for a better way to do things. For example, you know, my family and I, we found better ways to communicate and spending quality time together during this pandemic. Through all of this, though, that is going on with your retirement, maybe there's a better way to generate income. As you all saw the last few months, the market dropped significantly just in a couple of weeks, somewhere around 30 to 40%. And how do you draw money from those accounts once they've dropped 30 to 40%? So I'm sure those of you out there that are in this situation are not happy with where you're at. We cannot control the markets. None of us have a crystal ball. So when you have money in the market that you're using for income, you do not know if that money is going to last throughout the rest of your life. That's why you have to be open to new ideas and potentially different ways to invest your money to give you that income that's going to last throughout the rest of your life, Chad, no matter whether the market goes up or down, because just in a couple weeks, that 37% loss is pretty hard to take as you get closer to retirement or when you do retire.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just thinking about the normal family or the normal individual, I mean, a lot of us, we're so used to having our routines and doing the same thing over and over again. And, you know, I think, you know, we get into that routine. It's very hard to get out of that routine. But, you know, it's kind of reminded me of people that are in that routine of working, somebody looking at retirement here in the next, you know, 1 to 3 years. That routine of going to work and doing things, now all of a sudden, you got to make changes, and not only changes with your lifestyle, but you've got to make some pretty significant changes when it comes to your hard-earned dollars. And so I think to make that change, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but we've got to do that. For sure, and you know, we're going to talk today about the old school way of thinking. In other words, you have to have stocks and bonds in your portfolio. But again, this isn't the 70s or 80s where interest rates are at all-time highs. Actually, interest rates are at all-time lows. And you know, the Fed's talked about many times, hey, we're going to take these interest rates if we have to negative, and then you got the volatility of the market. So the whole equilibrium of stocks and bonds, one goes down, one comes up, that's pretty much all out the window, and that's what we call that old way of financial planning. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about stocks and bonds, but we're also going to talk about the new way of financial planning and the new way of how to educate yourself and to get your portfolio set up properly. Because again, the old way of thinking was, Chad, also, when you retired, 80% of American workers 20 years ago had a pension. Today, less than 20%, that number's going down all the time. So now you have to be proactive and you have to build a game plan to take care of you. The days and the times of depending on somebody else to take care of you are gone. Well, and a couple little things. You know, as you get closer to retirement, they always talked, and we still talk. You need to start de-risking, protecting yourself. Well, we just have to open our minds. In a low rate environment today, it's going to be rising. What are some different alternatives to maybe add some safety and protection to provide that peace of mind?
When we return on the Coach's Corner, we're going to discuss the old way of financial planning and why it may no longer be right for you. We'll be right back. The number one concern of retirees today is outliving their hard-earned dollars. It is more important now than ever to educate and empower yourself to make better decisions with your money than it has taken you 30 to 40 years to accumulate. How do you do this? By using our Financial GPS, our guided planning system. This is a 4-step process to help get you successfully to and through retirement. The first step in this process is to create clarity. Here we will help identify your goals as well as your concerns and identify what you want to accomplish in retirement. The second step, we will analyze the risk you're taking with your current portfolio, and this step will also identify exactly what you are paying in fees. In the third step, we will evaluate and assess your current plan and help identify the gap between the missing pieces. And in the fourth and final step, this is where we will work together to implement a plan of action to accomplish your retirement goals. And this process can take place at any one of our convenient locations in Missouri, at our Creve Coeur and Sunset Hills offices, or in Illinois at our Edwardsville, Springfield, and Jacksonville locations. So call now to get set up on the right path on your journey through retirement. Welcome back to the Chad Slagle Show, coaching you to and through retirement. I'm back here with my colleague Chad Tobin, and today on the Coach's Corner, we're going to discuss the old way of financial planning and why it may no longer be right for you. You know, the old way of financial planning, Chad, as we talked about earlier, is much different than what pre-retirees and retirees will likely see today. You know, 20, 30 years ago, 80% of American workers had a pension, so they knew that while they were working, their employer was putting money, pumping money away for them once they retired to have that income stream, to have that pension coming in each and every month. And of course, it would last throughout the rest of their life, and if they set it up right, the rest of their spouse's life. However, today, less than 20% of American workers have a pension. Today, most people have a retirement plan through work such as a 401k or other kind of retirement plan. And they try to build this nest egg up so that once they do retire, they have a nice sized portfolio. But the problem today is that you have to make sure that nest egg lasts throughout the rest of your retirement, whether that's 20, 30, or 40 years. You have to find a way to create an income from it. And that is, when we talk about the old way of financial planning, when it came to your investments, you had to have a good mix of stocks and bonds and really just a pension. However, the new way now is about building that game plan to get you successfully to and through retirement. As I mentioned earlier, stop relying on somebody else to take care of you.
Yeah, and I think, Chad, you know, a lot of times you mentioned, you know, a lot of our parents and grandparents, they relied on that pension. They knew it was going to come in. And so that stock bond portfolio, you know, when you wanted to de-risk and add bonds, made a lot of sense in a different kind of interest rate environment and proved to be okay. But one thing that we see is a lot of people still have that same stock and bond portfolio today. And they don't have a pension to go back on. So in the past, it was maybe a little supplemental income you needed.
Right.
Now it's that fixed income that you need, and you don't have that pension in place.
It's almost 180, completely different than what it was 20, 30 years ago. So today what we want to do, the first point that we want to talk about is you need to understand stocks and bonds. And of course, what exactly is a bond? A bond is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower. A bond could be thought of, really, Chad, as an IOU between the lender and borrower that includes the details of that loan and its payments. Basically, with a bond, you're loaning a corporation or a municipality, you're loaning them your money for a period of time, and in return, they're paying you an interest rate. When that term is up, then you get your lump sum back. That's really what a bond is today.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of people now, today, and even in the past, they thought bonds were completely safe. And, you know, to be very honest, what we've seen a lot of times is, you know, looking back to an 07, 08 type stock market, we saw bonds, what people thought were safe, actually lose value. And it's something that we've seen. We've seen municipalities go under and people lose money. So, you know, the definition of safety, you know, may be a little bit more conservative, correct, but as far as true safety, we've seen the loss of value in those.
And of course, when we talk about returns, you can't beat stocks. You know, you can get a greater return with stocks, but in order to get that return, you have to take on that volatility and you have to take on that risk. So that's stocks and bonds and where we're at. Now, the other thing to understand is, you know, with bonds is what is that interest rate risk? As you mentioned earlier, Chad, interest rates are at all-time lows, right? And when interest rates come up, bond values come down. So we talk about interest rate risk. This is the most well-known risk in the bond market. Interest rates have an inverse relationship with bond prices. So when you buy a bond, you commit to receiving a fixed rate of return for a set period. Should the market rate rise from that date of the bond's purchase, its price will fall accordingly. The bond will then trade at a discount to reflect the lower return that an investor will make on the bond. So, as we said, as interest rates come up, those bond values go down.
Yeah, and I think, it's important to understand, back in the 1980s, a long time ago, over 40 years ago, interest rates were at all-time highs. And talking to clients and other people, people remember what they were getting paid on their CDs or what kind of interest rate they were paying to have their mortgage. And it was in double figures. Now, we're looking at rates nearly zero. According to bankrate.com, a 10-year treasury is at 0.7%. Just a year ago, that same 10-year treasury was over 2.2%. Right now, a five-year CD on average is about 1.3%, and a 30-year bond average is a little over 3.2%. So we're looking at safe money when these rates are at all-time lows. So what can we do to kind of have an alternative to try and keep our money safe but get a little bit more than what these rates are showing?
And then the other thing you figure in, Chad, is the rate of inflation. What does that look like? And then those values are basically zero. The other thing you have to understand with bonds is what's called default risk. As Chad mentioned earlier, these corporations, these municipalities, they do go under. Default risk occurs when the bond's issuer is unable to pay the contractual interest or principal on the bond in a timely manner, or really at all. Example would be, of course, General Motors. Something I talk about all the time. I grew up in a small farm town, and all I've ever driven since I was 16 years of age was a Chevy. Still drive one today. 30 some odd years later, if you would have told me 20 years ago that General Motors was going to go bankrupt, I would think you're nuts. But what happened? They went bankrupt. They went under. So it does happen even with some of the best corporations and the best municipalities that are out there today.
Well, and I think now, times like this that we're in right now, we're starting to see, companies that were very big and had a lot of cash flow and having a couple months of nothing, their bond ratings and their ratings are coming down. And I think we look at rating services that rate bonds, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, they're actually giving these bond issuers ratings. And, as ratings do go down, there could be some defaults on the bond payments. So these are just some things that you have to be aware of that's out there today.
And the other thing we just mentioned, inflation risk. For example, let's say you purchased a 3-year fixed bond and inflation rises to 10% that year. You're losing purchasing power due to inflation being higher than the bond rate. Now, hopefully, we're not going to have inflation at 10%. But as you mentioned, Chad, if you got a CD, a 5-year CD that's paying 1.3, let's just say inflation's at 2 or 2.5%, you're actually losing money, not to mention taxes as well, that you have to pay on a lot of those accounts each and every year. So you can see bonds are not necessarily the best choice for what we call fixed income or safer investments. And that really is the old way of financial planning. So what we want to discuss now, are there some alternatives? Are there some new ways to be able to have your money more secure, but still be able to give you that interest rate and income that you need to stay above the rate of inflation and to stay above the tax rates, whatever that may be now, but also in the future? To download our free white paper today about your retirement income planning checklist, visit www.schlegelfinancial.com/empoweryou. Coming up on Chalk Talk, we're going to discuss some new components to the new way of financial planning and how it can benefit you and your family in retirement. We'll be right back.
He's such an involved dad. He's always telling the kids stories. I remember when so-and-so said I couldn't do this or I didn't make this team. That's what drives him. In our family, we always tell our kids to stick up for each other. Stand behind one another. He feels it's his role to provide, keep us safe, and to make sure that the kids are taken care of. A lot of Chad's clients have the same traditional values, and he bonds with them. Each family has a different set of circumstances, and each family is unique and different. The common thread between all of Chad's clients is that they want the best for their family, just as he would our own family.
Welcome back into the Chad Slagle Show, coaching you to and through retirement. So we just discussed the old way of financial planning. Now we're going to discuss some components to the new way of financial planning and how it can benefit you and your family and your beneficiaries in retirement. You know, with bond yields at such low levels in the recent years, advisors and financial planners like us are often at pains to find other ways to de-risk our clients' portfolio, especially as you approach or get closer to retirement. As all of you should know, the more risk you have in your portfolio, the higher return potential, and this seems like a great strategy when you're young and you're working, grow at all costs, and have a lot of time to work and continue to build your nest egg. But it is not the case when you see retirement on the horizon when you're 3 to 5 years out. When you get closer to retirement, you have to find a balanced approach, one that has good solid dividend paying companies in it. So even if the market is down, you know that you will still be paying those dividends and your accounts are still growing. But on the safe side, you should demand something that you cannot lose. So if the market drops 37% in a few weeks like it did earlier this year, you know what the money invested in those safe vehicles do not lose a dime. And I think that's what's so important, Chad, is you have to have some kind of safety net, some kind of protection when we talk about having your portfolio set up, as we mentioned earlier, especially as you get closer to retirement. When I say closer, probably 5-10 years out from retirement.
And I think, it's common sense. When we talk to a lot of our clients, it's amazing as we get closer to retirement, that conversation we have with our clients is, yes, people realize that they don't want to take on as much risk in retirement. But everyone's different. So I think going into this, we have to understand everyone's situation is different, but our job is to kind of be able to bring some alternatives maybe that are going to be better moving forward than what we used in the past. So
speaking of alternatives, so let's jump in and discuss really what we call the new way of financial planning. In a recent study done by Roger Ibbotson, who is an economist and professor at Yale University, he discusses his research and why fixed indexed annuities outperform bonds and how they can smooth the return of a portfolio in volatile times like we're going through right now.
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Ibbotson and his firm, they looked at really a couple things, going way back, performance, but also in retirement, the downside protection that an alternative like a fixed indexed annuity can provide that maybe bonds can't moving forward.
And Chad, the proof is in the pudding, if you will. And what I mean by that, let's talk about actual returns, different kinds of portfolios that are set up, whether they're bonds, stocks, stock bonds, annuities, or stocks and annuities. So that's what we want to go through and talk about now. And, that's one thing that we talk about. We all know as you take on more risk, you have potential for higher return, but that risk, of course, is volatility. And as you approach retirement, you can't afford the lack of stability and that safety net that I talked about. And today, bonds are not the way to go, just what we talked about earlier, because the yields are so low and because the interest rates where they are right now. So Ibbotson and his team ran hypothetical simulations from 1927 to 2016 and simulated different portfolios and how they would perform in below bond return environments, which is in the environment that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I think as you can see, really the key is just, the old way of stock bond portfolio versus the balanced way. And what his firm has kind of looked at, a 60-40 stock bond portfolio over that time frame from 1927 to 2016 returned an average of 7.6%. If you kind of thought outside the box and added a little bit, a 60% stock, 20% bond, and added 20% of that fixed indexed annuity, over that same time frame, it actually returned a little over 8.1%. And then the other way, he showed a 60% stocks, 40% fixed indexed annuity over the same time frame returned over an 8.6% return. So I think, the latter two, what we also see is in these volatile times, that fixed index annuity can provide a downside protection that bonds and stocks don't provide as well.
And the biggest thing I would take from that, Chad, the first one you talked about was a 60 stock, 40 bond, 7.6% return. However, a 60 stock, 40% fixed indexed annuity, 8.63%. That's over a 1% return a year. Just imagine if that's over a 5, 10, or a 20-year period. So that's a huge difference. So the next point we want to bring up refers to the Secure Act that just took effect this year. Section 204 of the Secure Act created a fiduciary safe harbor provision for the selection of lifetime income providers inside of qualified retirement plans like 401k plans. it allows you to put your money into an annuity inside of a 401k. So again, you can now, inside of your 401k, provided that your employer has that set up properly, you can now set up annuities inside of your 401k. And the whole reason, Chad, is more of a safety net, but also more of providing that income stream when you retire.
Yeah, and I think, it's just important, as you mentioned, why did they do this is because pensions are gone. And people need that kind of peace of mind. So, a good type of a fixed annuity, fixed index annuity inside there to give you that option, what can it provide? Well, it can provide the potential to grow through index returns. It can provide the downside protection. So if we go through, turbulent times and the market comes down, it actually provides the principal protection in those bad years. And depending on the type of it, it can also provide an income benefit that later on you could turn on to provide you that pension that you don't have from your employer anymore. So, three very important things when it comes to retirement that can provide that maybe other options inside the plan don't.
And the last thing we want to talk about is how to invest now. You need to be, as I mentioned earlier, you need to be proactive and balanced with what you want to accomplish. And ask yourself, what do you need? And what do you want from your monies? Do you need income? Do you want to make sure you have a legacy where you leave your assets to your children and your grandchildren in the most tax efficient manner? Do you just want to have simple growth of your portfolio over a period of time? Once you have the answers to your questions, then you can start looking at what vehicles will provide the things you want, like income. We'll give you an income stream you can never outlive. We'll give you security of your portfolio in a down market, or we'll give you that growth and that balance during the ups and downs in the market. So it's really, you have to decide what are your goals and what do you want your money to do for you. Then from there, Chad, then you need to figure out, as we talked about earlier with the different returns, what percentages go in each bucket. What percentage goes in the stock bucket? What percentage goes in the fixed indexed annuity bucket?
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think you go back to what you were talking about. It's about percentages, and I like to call it balance. We're not saying you need to use all stocks, all bonds, or all fixed index annuity. It's really about creating the balanced approach, and everyone's different. So, what percentage in each of those buckets are right for you? And as Chad just mentioned, tailoring what you need out of each bucket is so important, and understanding what your money's going to do, whether it's in stocks, whether it's in fixed index annuities, or whether it's in bonds.
So we talk about percentages, how to set that up. We encourage you to kind of give you some tools to do that. We have a free white paper today about your retirement income planning checklist. To get that, visit www.schlegelfinancial.com/empoweryou. When we come back on our strategy play, we're going to discuss the old way versus the new way of retirement planning and which one you should follow today. We'll be right back. The number one concern of retirees today is outliving their hard-earned dollars. It is more important now than ever to educate and empower yourself to make better decisions with your money than it has taken you 30 to 40 years to accumulate. How do you do this? By using our FinancialGPS, our guided planning system. This is a 4-step process to help get you successfully to and through retirement. The first step in this process is to create clarity. Here we will help identify your goals as well as your concerns and identify what you want to accomplish in retirement. The second step, we will analyze the risk you're taking with your current portfolio, and this step will also identify exactly what you are paying in fees. In the third step, we will evaluate and assess your current plan and help identify the gap between the missing pieces. And in the fourth and final step, this is where we will work together to implement a plan of action to accomplish your retirement goals. And this process can take place at any one of our convenient locations in Missouri, at our Creve Coeur and Sunset Hills offices, or in Illinois at our Edwardsville, Springfield, and Jacksonville locations. So call now to get set up on the right path on your journey through retirement. On this week's strategy play, we're going to discuss the old way versus the new way of retirement planning and which you should follow. And unfortunately, Chad, what we find with a lot of retirees and pre-retirees, they're still investing that old way. And as we discussed about earlier with the pandemic, hopefully it's brought some things to light that you really need to change and start being more forward thinking with your retirement plan.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of take a look here, the old way of retirement planning, when you were working and still in those working years, you can see up here, your portfolio was set up in probably 80% or more in stocks, maybe the other 20% you had in bonds, but very little, if any, in CDs, fixed annuities, anything like that in that foundation here. But we've all heard de-risk as you get closer to retirement. So as you go and de-risk that old way of retirement, you kind of shifted. You de-risked it, you maybe went less into equities and stocks, so maybe 60%, and everything else you kind of went into the bonds.
And I think the biggest thing with this old way of thinking 10, 20 years ago, 80% of you had a pension. So you had that income stream coming in. So this wasn't all that you relied on. It really was more of a supplement, Chad. And it was kind of a rule of thumb about when you retire, this is the way it should look to reduce risk. And again, it was there to supplement. But what we talk about now with a lot of retirees, less than 20% of American workers have a pension. That number's going away each and every day. Now what we talk about is that new way of retirement planning, or that new way of thinking. And that new way is, Chad, as you mentioned, you have 80% stocks, 20% bonds when you're working, because it's all about growth. But now, as you get 3-5 years from retirement, or when you do retire, now it's about de-risking that portfolio. Now, as we talked about earlier, there are some other alternatives to be able to give you that safety net, to be able to give you that income that you need to last throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think, what we've kind of shared in some of the testing methods that we were looking at, now all of a sudden that de-risking, maybe it's thinking outside of the box. Maybe it's using some of the safe money strategies, the fixed indexed annuities in the portfolio as a better balance with some maybe bonds and also some stocks. So it's really about creating a better balanced plan as opposed to going through an old rule of thumb.
And as we said, now it's about giving you that income stream that's going to last throughout the rest of your life, the rest of your spouse's life. It's about adding that downside protection, giving you that safety net, if you will. And of course, it's all about reducing risk, because we are in very volatile times right now, and those are things that you have to protect yourself against. To get more detailed information on these strategies and how they can work for you, call us now to schedule your 5-point inspection at 888-294-9248, or email us at info@schlegelfinancial.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back with some of the key takeaways from today. We've covered a lot today, so let's jump in and talk about some of the key takeaways. Number one, have an open mind when it comes to investing your hard-earned dollars. Understand the old way of financial planning and why it may or may not be right for you. And number three, Chad, understand the components to the new way of financial planning and how it can benefit you and your family.
I think thinking outside of the box, understanding some of the new strategies that have been offered and created to get you through the next 20, 30, 40 years of retirement.
When we talk about those strategies and education, to download our free white paper today about your retirement income planning checklist, visit www.schlegelfinancial.com/empoweryou. Schlegel Financial and our team of advisors have different educational events coming up your area in the form of a webinar to make sure you are prepared for today's retirement. For more information and to sign up for one of these events, call 888-294-9248 or visit ChadSlegelShow.com. Remember, folks, success is waking up in the morning, whoever you are, wherever you are, no matter how old or young you are, and bounding out of bed because there's something out there that you love to do, that you believe in, that you're good at, and you can hardly wait to get at it again today. At Schlegel Financial, realize that this is bigger than our team. It's about educating you, the public, and our wonderful clients, and empowering you to make better decisions with your hard-earned dollars. For my colleague, Chad Tobin, this is the coach, Chad Schlegel. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to visiting with each and every one of you next week.